Welcome to Dev Interrupted. I'm your host, Andrew Ziegler.
And I'm your host, Lloyd Pearson.
This week, we're talking about Lead Dev's Engineering Leadership Report, the list of most desirable AI scientists that Meta and OpenAI are fighting over right now, and the day my toaster started taking phone calls. Ben, what catches your interest?
I mean, as much as I want to learn about a toaster making phone calls, I did get a chance to read Lead Dev's leadership report. So maybe we can start with that and we'll get to the toaster a little bit later.
Let's do it. So, the Lead Dev, they released their recent engineering leadership report. This is something they do yearly, where they surveyed 600 plus engineering leaders and asked them about how their roles are changing in response to things in the economic and industry environment, things that are changing all around us, right? What's the sentiment of leaders and developers in this space right now? And there were a lot of interesting findings in the report. Ben, what stood out to you?
Yeah, so I mean, the first one that, I think everyone's always looking at these kind of data sets, but the effects of AI on productivity. So in this report, they mentioned that 19% of survey participants said they saw no impact from AI. And then a further 62% were somewhere in the range of like 1 to 30% improvements. I think about, 20 or so percent or 25% were in the like 11 to 30% range. And then the rest were below that. And it's interesting because that really does kind of align with a lot of the research and including our own research that we've done around productivity improvements from coding assistants primarily. I think that's the primary way that most engineering teams have adopted AI at this point. And you see usually around 10 to 30% improvement if you're using it regularly. So yeah, definitely like just aligning with stuff we've seen already in the past. One thing that was really interesting, though, is 65% of the people that were surveyed were worried about a recession. And I'm not hugely into economics. I pay attention a little bit, but I do understand that like people's sentiment around the economy and around the future of their own like financial prosperity can often be a pretty good indicator for like how things are actually looking in the real world. So that's kind of concerning. But something that kind of counters this is they had lots of charts in this report of comparing like responses this year to various questions versus responses last year. So one of them asked about like things that your company has done over the last 12 months, and a promising sign was that both hiring freezes and layoffs dropped quite a bit this year versus the year prior. So I think kind of goes counter a little bit to the narrative of like AI is either causing people to rethink hiring plans or maybe put off hiring. But there was also some mixed bag responses, particularly around AI. So a lot of companies are out there shipping AI in their products. Like 63% of respondents said that their company has shipped an AI capability in the last year. And then, in terms of biggest concerns, the people they surveyed were a little more concerned this year about things like upskilling junior developers for AI as well as code maintainability. So definitely indicating that some of the issues that we've been seeing around like call it vibe coding or what have you, but people using AI in ways that aren't as productive, particularly junior developers. But there's also been concerns around, data privacy, intellectual property, the learning curve around this stuff. Those have actually been reduced. So, it's not all, a bad picture for AI adoption, but yeah, it's kind of all over the place. And I did want to mention, we had Scott Carey from Lead Dev on the show a while back, where we talked about where all the laid off engineers were going back during one of the last many rounds of layoffs. It'd be great to have him or someone else from Lead Dev come back on and talk about this discrepancy between the hype around AI and replacing software developers and the reality that like it seems like teams still need to hire plenty of software developers.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to learn from this report, and something that really stood out to me as I was reading the results is kind of like the verb used in measuring about it's listening to what do engineers right now believe and what do they worry about? And those are really interesting indicators about the environments that people work in. And for me, that really hints at larger issues that obviously not just throwing tools at things can fix. These are communication, team structural issues, being on the same page, right? So I think there's a really big opportunity to really crack open this report and talk about that and maybe even identify some strategies for teams that do find themselves with like a lot of worry or anxiety, or they have beliefs that don't match up on both sides of leadership and IC. What are some things that they can do to actually tackle that? I think there's a lot to learn from this report. So it's a great kind of start to figuring that out.
Yeah, and one thing that I think is really important to keep in mind is, AI adoption is happening in a lot of different ways across teams, and the really important thing is
Yeah,
just to have visibility into what your team is doing. Like, where are you being successful? Where are you encountering difficulties? And just really break down that problem. Like, don't just assume that adopting AI, giving it to your developers is going to be successful or not successful across the board. There's actually going to be a variety of success stories, and the only way you're going to know is to have visibility into its adoption.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, so let's talk about this next story. I can't leave the toaster phone calls hanging for too long. So what's going on here?
Okay, fine. So this is a story that I loved. You loved it too, I think, when you read it. This is by Scott Warner about MCP being the accidental universal plugin system for all things in the world right now. It introduces a really clever concept called the toaster principle, the idea that every great protocol gets used for something its creators never envisioned. He lists some iconic ones like HTTP was for academic papers. Now the whole world runs on it. Bluetooth was just for, using your hands-free calling, when you're in the office, and now it does everything like unlock your front door. USB was just to plug in your mouse and your keyboard. That's all it was for. And now you can plug everything through the universal port, and it also powers data and all sorts of stuff. So, there there were a lot of fun, uh, captured moments in this short, sweet essay that I think everyone should go check out, on Scott Warner's blog. It works on my machine is what it's called, and I'll be sure to include the link in the show notes. Ben, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, so I mean, the kind of core principle of this is that MCP has accidentally become like this universal plugin system for like basically everything from toasters to pillows to whatever else you could connect to something. And he did. I love the reference that I love the most from this. Actually, was the Warcraft 3 reference uh, about like having your GPT workflows or your MCP workflows responding to you like as if they were the peons in Warcraft 3. Like, I've always kind of secretly dreamed of that.
That's
Um,
funny.
but we've been trying to create like this like one API standard to rule them all for decades, and it kind of seems like we might have accidentally stumbled into that thing, into the thing that achieves that. But given the nature of like AI, of course, this stuff is probabilistic and a little bit chaotic. So it's almost like we've standardized on like the most random option possible. It's like instead of having like strictly defined criteria, we just kind of like hook an AI up to it and say, "Have at it." you know. But I for one welcome the day that my toaster talks to my pillow.
Yeah, I mean, it's a JSON schema like on top of an API, right? It's like a nice wrapper. It works for so many things that already exist in our world. It's also immensely fun to play with. If you haven't messed around with MCP technology, trying to build one, use your own. There's so many interesting use cases. I've been tinkering with my own in the last week, and I've learned a lot about how LLMs interact with tools that help me just use all of these tools and better in general now. So if anyone, is listening to this also tinkering with these types of folks, I know we talked about it last week too, with Andrew Hamilton on the show. Would love to hear. Maybe we can work together on some stuff because we're all figuring it out together.
Yeah. Yeah, and this next one is a story we've been covering for a little while, so we just kind of felt like we couldn't leave it hanging. So what do we have here with Meta?
Yeah, so we're giving another update on this story. I know folks have been tuning into Dev Interrupted. We've been covering this now for like last 3 weeks, and really every week we try to leave it. We like, oh, let's talk about something else, but then there's just like a new development that's too juicy or interesting or totally unorthodox in the
Yeah.
engineering hiring world that it would be remiss of us to skip it. So another one of those has happened. So I'm gonna try to sum up the latest in the saga for you. So after OpenAI's chief researcher that kind of went after Meta, kind of aggressively poaching their scientists. They likened it to a home burglary, someone coming into their own home and taking things. And it became evident that the social media giant Meta, they released a giant list of names and bios of employees that recently held roles at places like OpenAI, Anthropic, Google DeepMind, showing us that they're not just going after OpenAI. They're poaching all of the best AI talent in the industry right now and bringing them together. So Zuckerberg dropped this memo that explained or rather, the chief researcher dropped this memo that explained the incoming um, list of staff and their amazing, backgrounds and credentials. These are incredibly seasoned and intelligent AI researchers and scientists that have built the technology has got us to where we are, right? So this recruiting frenzy is in a total hype right now. Meta's looking to staff a 50-member super intelligence lab, which is, has a lot of question marks about what its goals are and where it will go. But he's staffing it with the most sought after talent and is bringing a sharp response from other leaders in the field, who have been competing directly against Meta in this escalating war for AI dominance. So, uh, a really interesting development in the saga. A lot of emotions also on both sides. You can tell that this runs deeper than maybe some of their past quarreling, and these transfer of staff is really hitting all of these teams hard.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure how big OpenAI is at this point, but even if they're at a few hundred people, like if you lose, 5 to 10 of your like top experts, like that can really hurt the like just it changes the culture of your company sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I'm wondering if there's people out there listening to us from OpenAI, like maybe Sam Altman himself is listening to this because he mentioned he mentioned how uh, they were going to readjust compensation packages as a part of this, and that was what I was telling everyone who works there when we first covered this to go talk to their boss about. So yeah, maybe we did have an impact on that, Andrew.
Oh yeah, maybe you influence them into most in this like genius scenario when all of your colleagues are getting poached for tens and hundreds of millions of
Yeah,
dollars. You might go ask your boss for a little bit more money. I think
yeah,
that's it. I think that's the good play here for sure.
yeah. But
But
it's
where do you think
really,
it's going, Ben?
I mean, it's starting to feel like an exercise in like who can burn money the fastest.
Yeah, totally.
Like this super intelligence lab. I'm not really sure how I feel about it yet. And I kind of personally just wonder if this effort to get like super intelligence or like AGI are really misguided. Like, I kind of wonder if maybe the future of AI isn't in having like a singular model that rules everything in your life, but rather like what if it was just more of a quiet like everyday interactions just start having specialized AI that shows up and solves very discrete problems. Like I think that actually may be long term the thing that has the biggest impact,
Yeah.
like on the quality of our life, on productivity, on however you want to measure it. Like I just don't know about this chase for like trying to have like some sort of artificial generalized intelligence. I don't know if that's really the play that all of these billionaires should be focusing on.
Yeah, it's always been tough to parse that as the goal. I think anyone who's not the CEO of one of those companies right now maybe has a bit of trouble parsing that goal, and it's a bit nebulous, right? I think that the superintelligence labs, it could be an incubator for all sorts of things with AI's impact on the world. Because lots of people have pointed out, and this is something that I always come back to and think about is, we could stop researching and innovating and discovering new things about LLMs today, and there would still be so much that we need to do and implement
Absolutely.
and change about our world that's possible now. It's like a before and after scenario that we haven't even really begun to truly dig into it and get that impact deep, right? So there's so many problems in front of us we can solve. All of these smart people together in one place, they're going to continue to push the frontier and make that more possible for more people. So, I think that just kind of it's inspiring a bit that people will be able to come together and maybe solve higher order problems at a faster and faster pace thanks to technology like this. But it does mean we need to like focus on what those problems are, bring people to the table, and everyone work together to understand it because there's a lot of work ahead of us, and we're not all super fundraisers like OpenAI and Meta, and they need They need AGI and super intelligence because they need like the northeast North Star they can possibly come up with to rally everyone in that direction. But for the rest of us, I think it's important to focus on the impact we can make right in here, right now, today.
Yeah, I think what you're trying to say is more MCPs, less super intelligence.
Always more MCPs. I'm having tons of fun with those, Ben.
Yeah. Cool. Well, there's one really quick story I just want to cover here at the end as part of our ongoing coverage of all the companies out there trying to make their AI push. And this is Grammarly announcing that they are acquiring the email startup Superhuman as a part of a push to get more AI into their platform. So the reason I bring this up is like literally the only two productivity apps in the world that I use are Grammarly and Superhuman. So it's like my two worlds just colliding right now. Um, but yeah, great tools. It's really interesting to see a company like Grammarly continuing to try to adopt to the AI age, particularly when you have people like our producer Adam out there claiming that companies like Grammarly are going to lose their market or something because of AI. I don't know if that's the future, but and Grammarly has done a lot of AI things in their product up to this point that I'm not really sure if they've had a lot of success getting users to adopt them. Like I've tried out a few, um, but for me, Grammarly has always been sort of this like deterministic check on uh, the 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 content that I write, and I think in the age of AI helping us produce a lot of content here at Dev Interrupted now, it's still serving to be a pretty valuable deterministic check in the same way that like an engineering team is going to continue to have a CI/CD system that builds and deploys their software and have static analysis that analyzes it before it goes into production. So yet another company, we saw in the lead dev survey, lots of people are adding AI to their product now. It's I think it's just interesting to see this like an industry standard tool also making that push.
Yeah, this is a fun news bit because I've known you for a while, Ben, and Grammarly and Superhuman entering together, that must have been just like the biggest news on your recommended news dash that day. That's like highly specialized news for a power user like you. And honestly, at this point, all it needs to do is just roll into Asana, and then you would have just one
Yeah.
app you could use for everything. That would be pretty cool.
Well, no, I think what you're saying is I need my Grammarly MCP and my Superhuman MCP and my Asana MCP all working together. I think that's where we're
Yeah,
headed.
yeah, you got to start working on that toolbox, yeah, or at least figuring out what goes inside of it. But Ben, I think you're sitting down with our guest this week, so want to tell us about what we're roughly listening to?
Yeah, well, my guest is me, actually, believe it or not. And
Ooh,
so stay tuned after the break. Dan Lyons is going to join the show to interview me about the guide that we recently published, The 6 Trends in AI Driven Software Development. So stick around.
I'm your host, Dan Lyons, co-founder of LinearB. In today's episode, we're going to focus on a fundamental shift we're seeing in the industry. We have the rise of AI-driven development, of course, but the thing is, this isn't just about AI coding assistants anymore. Now we're in 2025. We're witnessing a move towards intelligent systems. They can drive decisions, execute actions. A lot of this stuff is reshaping how software is built. And to help me unpack the how of these trends and shaping the future of software development, I've got Ben Lloyd Pearson here, BLP, LinearB's Director of DevX Strategy, in the hot seat. So Ben, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, I guess, to the to the show that I help run. But no, it is nice to have something that we've produced that we get to talk about a little bit. Yeah, and you mentioned it. I think one of the best things about working here at Dev Interrupted and LinearB is that we get to meet engineering leaders every single week and just discuss the challenges that they're facing. And one of the things I think both of us are hearing from kind of the two ends of that spectrum is, right, everyone's talking about AI strategy these days. Like, how do you take it to the next level? Like, you've bought some tooling, you've maybe seen some success, but like, how do you use that to then start actually improving productivity, making improvements to developer experience? And the truth is, it's just really hard to navigate that space right now. So So I'm happy to be here today to talk about some of the insights we've pulled from our community and from past DI guests about how companies are maturing their AI workflows. And you kind of referenced it, but we're out with this new guide that we published called The 6 Trends Shaping the Future of AI-Driven Development. And yeah, really looking forward to breaking down some of the findings from this.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I think you're totally right. Like honestly, every customer call that I have or any call that I have with like a CTO or a VP, this is the topic of discussion. It is hard to navigate right now. And I think the other thing that makes it hard, like with the navigation, is how fast things are moving.
Exactly.
It's almost like a week by week thing. What LLM are you using? Is it working, not working? There's legal aspects, there's developer experience. So that's super cool that we have the guide available. I know we're going to include it in the show notes and all of that. And I know you're pretty deep into it. I'm going to kick us off. I think we have about 6 topics, 5 to 6 topics here.
Yeah.
I'm going to kick us off with the first one. I'm going to ask you a more broad question to begin, and then we'll see where this goes. So here's the question. Is AI becoming the backbone of modern software engineering? And what does that actually mean in practice? What's the biggest misconceptions leaders have about this transition today? What are you hearing, Ben?
Yeah, and just real quick, I want to touch on a point you just made that, with how fast this is shaping, like, I'm pretty proud of the team we have here at Dev Interrupted at being how quickly we've adapted to AI to really adopt it into our workflows. We've had lots of requests to help teach other people how to do it, but it's changing so rapidly that I feel like the moment we understand something that solves our own workflow, before we could even share that knowledge with others, like our understanding of it changes and we've moved on to the next thing. And I think there's been, this you asked about misconceptions. I think the biggest one right now is that I've seen this perception that you can buy a tool, give it to your developers, and just have them start prompting it to do something for their work. And frankly, this is a recipe for disaster. Like these AI tools, GPT tools, they require a lot of context to be successful. So think of them like a tourist. Actually, they're new here. They have a specific goal in mind, and they disappear forever after they've been successful. And when you think about a tourist, like they need lots of signs, they need clear pathways that guide them. Sometimes they need information kiosks or occasionally like a human expert to step in and help them get back on the right track. And AI behaves in a very similar pattern. And you need the infrastructure to provide enough context. So what we've really tried to do with this guide is to break through all of these things that are changing daily and look at the stuff that as an engineering organization you need to build so that fundamentally so that you're in a place to take advantage of this AI revolution, for lack of a better phrase. Because it doesn't come down to better prompting, it comes down to better systems, and that's what this guide is trying to show.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's systems and strategy. I mean, the other thing is, like you mentioned, hey, if you're a leader and you're saying, hey, I'm just going to buy a few tools and try to piece them together or something. And then the worst thing you can do if you're doing that is also promise back to the business productivity on the other side. It's like, yeah, I bought some Cursor, I bought some Copilot, I bought this other tool for like a review or something like that, and we're going to be good to go. Yeah. So I think that's another, I don't know, maybe it's a misconception or just a warning up front. I do believe the CTOs, the VPs, and you have titles now like the head of AI strategy, like all of that. You do need a surrounding strategy to some of the foundational stuff that you were just talking about to actually execute well, I think, to get the productivity that you may be promising back to the business.
Yeah.
So something to be aware of there. Now, I think the first section of the guide is around unified knowledge. So the first trend you identifies that unified knowledge is the new productivity fuel. This one stood out to me. So why is something as fundamental as knowledge management the first and most critical piece to this AI puzzle, Ben?
Yeah, and I like that you say most critical, because I do actually believe if you're listening to this episode and you take one thing away from it, this is probably where you could get the most advantage from focusing. And the truth here is that to unlock real productivity from AI, your engineering teams are going to have to turn any sort of fragmented tribal knowledge into a unified and high quality context that you can feed to AI agents. So, you think about the typical organization today, like often information that is important for decision making can be fragmented across tools or trapped in like various, locally owned parts of your knowledge base. It could be like a chat message or an email thread or some outdated documentation, or with code, like comments within the code itself. It's scattered from all of these different places.
Yeah.
And there's a really big risk when, humans are really great at sort of stitching together context without having the complete picture in front of them, but AI isn't. If you're giving incomplete or missing or out of context data to an AI agent, they are going to make bad decisions. So really any sort of data silo that you have within your organization is going to hinder giving AI agents access to what might be essential context. So, any areas that you have inconsistent or missing documentation, you're going to see resistance or difficulties adopting AI within their workflows.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit, because I think it's interesting. And while you were kind of breaking that down, I was thinking about, okay, AI versus human developer. Now, if I'm a human developer, which I was at one point, I was a human at one point, I was a developer, both of those. It's almost like while you're developing, you might get to a point where you lack context to make the right decision. And then you start searching for the context. You're like, okay, I know we have documentation. Let me go and find it. Oh, shit, actually, the documentation isn't so good, but I know the developer that wrote this, so let me go talk to that person.
Exactly.
Now I gain the context. Or you might say, hey, I'm working in this repo or this area of code. I need to call someone else's area of code. I don't know exactly how that works or the API. And you can always, I think, go and find someone usually and have that conversation, get the context. Now, the downside to that, obviously, is that takes a lot of time. I have to stop what I'm doing. Now, with AI, right, the promise of it and how it's working today, this stuff is pretty much instantaneous. But like you said, if the AI cannot find what it needs, it is going to give an answer. It might give like a snippet of code, but it's probably going to be incorrect.
Exactly.
Now, one thing that I've been talking about, so LinearB, we have an AI code review today. We have a pretty killer AI code review. Yep. I talked to our head of AI, who I consider our head of AI, Ofer, and where we're going with this is actually in this context area. So if you think about what LinearB can do, we provide you, probably a lot of our listeners know, with all these different metrics, but the way that we get these metrics is we're connected into Jira, we're connected into Slack, we can see all of the incidents, we can see bugs that went out into production, change failure, we can see documentation. We have this like wealth of connectivity. And now actually what we're doing next in the roadmap is going to be, while our AI review is processing, if it doesn't have a piece of information that it needs, of course it can go get information from other repos. It can get it from documentation. We can see if there's a bug in the area. So we're actually connecting or connecting together that missing context, which totally makes sense, because that's what you're saying in this first part of the guide, is making sure that you have all of that connectivity so the AI can essentially find the answer that it needs.
Yeah, and I love, because you're touching on a lot of points that we're going to get into later in this episode too. So stay tuned for that, because I really love how this stuff is all kind of connected. But as a part of this guide, we went back through recent Dev Interrupted history, and we found a lot of former guests that really articulate some of the challenges that we're highlighting in this guide. And for this one, we had Brandon Jung from Tab 9 on, who last year discussed with us about this concept of like creating golden repositories, or in other words, a piece of code or a collection of code that you trust as being really high quality and has all the context behind it for why it was constructed that way. Like those types of resources are really valuable for AI when you're starting to get it to make more decision making. And I think what's really important to understand from this guide is that all the recommendations we're making here are both things that will help your human developers today, as you put it, Dan, but also the AI developers that are coming around the corner for you. So you want to do things like establishing data hygiene practices across your organization, maintain high quality training data sets, like establish responsibility within your organization for who's responsible for maintaining high quality data sets, and start working towards centralizing that knowledge into a place where you can start feeding it into your AI models. And the great thing about this is that AI can actually help you do this. So you can start using AI today to start preparing for these changes that we can see around the corner.
Yeah. That golden repo concept is pretty cool, actually.
Yeah. We are adopting it for a lot of workflows. It's kind of been incredible to me how much software engineering has aligned with like the content creation workflows we're building here at Dev Interrupted. And the more we have these like idealized sources of information, the more effective our AI workflows can be.
Yeah. And I don't know if it says it in the guide or not. So I'll ask you a question. Maybe we don't know. Let's see if we have it in the guide. But is there anything that like qualifies as like a golden? Is there any like criteria behind it? Is there? I know it has to do with like a level of trust. We think the code is really, really great, something like that. But I don't know if it gets into it. Is there anything that like qualifies for, okay, it's like meeting the bar of what's needed?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is this varies from organization to organization. What you don't want to do is to feed code that you know has significant difficulties into an AI as a training resource. So as long as you're avoiding that, this is the kind of thing where you can iterate and get better. Like the more you feed better data into it, the more it can help you create better data for training. So there's definitely like a cyclical, there's a great benefit to taking an iterative approach to just like continuously improving whatever data you're feeding into your AI.
Yeah, very cool. I'm going to move us on
Yeah.
to the next pillar that we have here. So this is around modernizing for agentic workflows. So the second trend that was uncovered in this area of modernizing infrastructure for agentic workflows, it feels like a lot of teams maybe are still struggling with basic like CI/CD, and now we're talking about like modernizing the infrastructure for agents again here. What new layers like agentic observability or sandbox testing are required for these more advanced AI systems?
Yeah, so you mentioned how LinearB's AI is able to go out and connect with all these various tools to pull additional data and context into the workflows. And for agentic AI to be successful, you're going to need platforms that are designed in that way, right? A lot of teams are still stuck with like more legacy infrastructure that is potentially stifling automation and scalability and developer velocity. So, when you really think about it, agentic AI and AI-driven software development is going to require tooling that isn't widespread yet within the most engineering organizations. So you might have like some outdated or manual ops practices that have like little to no automation, or maybe there's no self-service capabilities. You probably also have like ticket-based workflows within your company, like I'm thinking like Jira for project management, ServiceNow. Those aren't all going to scale for AI adoption in the way that we use them today. Like I like to think about it this way. Like if your coding time is going from, let's say, 2 days down to 2 hours, like what does that mean for a QA process that might take a day or two? Like that now becomes a substantial bottleneck within your workflow. And there's also just like the challenge of like modern engineering just requires a lot of infrastructure knowledge that developers just aren't always trained for. Like the technologies are changing constantly. Most developers are trained to write code rather than to think about infrastructure problems. And this all just creates a lot of friction for adopting agentic AI.
Yeah. Actually, you know what? One of the things that I'm seeing, at least with like the customers that I'm working with, and of course, a lot of this goes back to like the developer's experience. Like, okay, again, you might buy an AI tool, but the developers are the ones that are expected to interact with it, use it, make it. I think like a lot of this comes down to like the accuracy or the quality or the integrity of the suggestions or the code generation that the AI is able to provide. So, for example, in the first two kind of sections that we talked about, yeah, if there maybe isn't these golden repos, or maybe there's the agent's having a hard time getting an answer, working its way through the different areas of your workflows and the infrastructure, the quality is not going to be there.
Right.
And what I've seen is when we're interacting now, we're talking with the developers, and maybe it's obvious, but I'll say it, the best AI tools that they like working with are the ones that are giving accurate, high quality suggestions.
Yep.
And that's where their experience is actually improving and their productivity is improving. Now you have the flip side of that. Hey, I bought an AI tool. Maybe my infrastructure or workflows or the context wasn't there. And actually, it can be pretty annoying to work with because it's giving me suggestions that are incomplete, wrong, that type of thing. So I think it's also like a sensitive time for developer experience. And
Absolutely.
therefore, it's like really important to get these first two kind of pillars that the guide talks about right. I don't know if you've seen that at all, Ben. That's what I'm experiencing.
Yeah.
Like in the field.
Absolutely. There's definitely a very strong perception I've seen of developers who are very frustrated with how AI initiatives have been going. And it's almost always rooted around high volumes of low quality output. And we'll actually dive into this a little bit more later in this episode. But I think back to an episode we had not too long ago with Corey O'Daniel from Mass Driver. And one of the things that he pointed out is that platform engineering is going to become much more important in this era as a way to abstract the complexity of working with AI. Like you shouldn't be relying on every individual developer to navigate all of these difficulties. Like a more centralized platform engineering oriented team, even if it's not a dedicated team, if it's just a group of people who care about it, who have been given authority to act on it. You want them to be focused on enabling developers to ship code using AI without adding infrastructure or just like burdensome overhead. So the more you're investing into like better pipelines, better automation, test coverage, the more you'll enable your developers to accelerate without amplifying risk. So if you already have really reliable pipelines, introducing AI into it helps reduce the risk with that.
Yeah, totally makes sense to me. What I like about this guide, I think we only made it to the first two, and we have a few more to go here. But if you're looking at each one of these maybe 6 pillars of the guide, it essentially is helping you form a strategy.
Exactly.
Because again, like we said from the beginning, it's not just like buy an AI tool, turn it on, you're good to go. It's like the best engineering orgs, the best companies actually are looking at all these different factors and saying, this is how I'm going to actually put a strategy together to make, I guess, productivity output in the best experience for our developers. So this is I like this about the guide.
Yeah, and like I said, we're also focusing heavily on stuff that is going to benefit you today too. Like it's there's a lot of benefits to adopting these practices now beyond AI. So you're just helping developers today while being prepared for tomorrow.
The next section that we have here, and I hear this actually like a good amount from customers, but there's this area of like governance or control. It's a pretty, I think, critical topic here. And maybe it's even just around trust. So as agents start taking actions, like they're merging PRs or they're triggering a deployment, they're creating more and more code, governance that topic is starting to become essential, and especially if you're like, leading a company that's in like finance, healthcare, critical, systems, stuff like
Yeah.
that, banking, like all of that. This third trend maybe is kind of like reframing this. It's saying using governance as an AI enabler as opposed to a blocker. So why is it important to see governance as an enabler rather than a barrier?
So yeah, you mentioned how like AI agents are going to start taking real actions in our workflows. And what you want to try to do is shift compliance from being a hurdle that developers have to overcome to one that implements or establishes trust with your agentic AI and makes it more explainable and scalable. So you have all these autonomous agents making decisions, like you said, they're merging PRs, they're identifying and deploying hot fixes, at least they will be soon. And this naturally is going to raise a lot of concerns around safety, auditability, and accountability. Um, and really, what's at the center of this is, LLMs are inherently probabilistic, yet we're often sort of viewing them through like the deterministic lens of software development. Even in, like, as you said, high stakes environments, like when you're working in banking, there's certain situations where you don't want to have like a probabilistic actor, such as like when determining how much money somebody has in their bank account. Um, but the challenge is that with AI, they're kind of like a black box, and it can be very difficult to trace their reasoning or ensure a high level of explainability. So if you don't have clear audit trails, if you don't have trustworthy data sources, as we mentioned earlier, your teams aren't going to be able to reliably validate the decisions of AI. And I think back to an episode we had with quite recently with Brooke Hartley Moy, the CEO of InFactory, and she made a really bold statement where she said that trust is the only thing that is going to matter at the foundational level with your LLMs. Um, if your developers don't trust the outputs of their AI, or if your business doesn't trust the output of it, then you're fundamentally going to have difficulties with your AI strategy.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm saying the same thing. And what I keep thinking about is that makes sense for AI. It also makes sense for developers, both. Like if let's say that you had a situation, you don't trust the output of your developers.
Right.
Well, then the business isn't going to trust. If you don't trust the output of the AI, also the business is going to trust. So it's actually like a very similar or same paradigm. It's just probably much less trust right now with the AI. But the cool thing that I'm seeing is companies still want to use it and move forward. It's not like governance is, I haven't seen it be like a blocker to try. But what I will say is most of the companies that I'm working with, there has to be rules in place around the AI. And these rules are
Right.
always, I'm sure we'll talk about it maybe even later again with like orchestrating and stuff. But you have to have rule automations that kind of surround the AI around what's allowed to be merged, what's not allowed to be merged, how does your review work. It's kind of like vibe coding, but like the backstop, the review check, AI's generated a bunch of stuff, but let's make sure that we still have gates, checks, quality in place so that what does make it to production, because we still want to be accelerated, still want to move faster. And like I said, a lot of the customers that I'm working with, they are actually writing rules usually around the PR process to ensure that the code is making it out with like super high quality.
Yeah, and you call them gates, but I think it's important to recognize that if you're giving a developer who's been blocked by one of these gates, so to speak, if they just get blocked and they don't have clear instructions on what the next step is or why things are being blocked, then you create frustration, you destroy trust. Whenever you're creating like a governance framework, it should always be centered around enabling developers. It's if you're going to block them, tell them what the next step is to get unblocked and help them take that first step. I think that's a really important distinction here when you're thinking about governance. I mentioned Brooke Hartley Moy's episode. She had a lot of great advice about building better audit trails that are built on trustworthy data sources. I think one thing that's really critical is that you implement smart human-in-the-loop mechanisms that in any AI workflow. So there are certain things that you can hand off to an autonomous system to delegate that task. But then there's always going to be moments, at least for the foreseeable future, where a human will need to interject or be prompted to step in and be an active participant in the decision making. So the more fluid those human in the loop moments are, the better. And as I mentioned, you want your governance frameworks to be designed to give developers the easiest path forward and avoid shifting left the responsibility for compliance onto developers without giving them those automated tools to take action. So, I think there's a sense that as you're building autonomous systems, there needs to be automated guardrails that keep everything going down the right pathway.
Yeah, it's almost like you're right. It's like gates is not the best word. It's almost like you got to smooth out the workflow with automation and make it visible and transparent to the developer on what the rules of the game are. So there's not like confusion, which, like you said, can be a frustrating experience. Why am I getting blocked versus something else, and all of that? That makes total sense to me.
I think when you're talking to your head of legal, it is a gate. It's a gate to protect compliance issues.
That's for
security.
Sure. Hey, we have gates, we have critical paths, we have control. That's what they're looking for. You have to have automated control.
When you're talking to your developers, it's a guidebook, right? It's a path for doing things the right way.
Let's move on to the fourth part of the guide. So this is talking about isolated tools versus a more orchestrated system here. So most AI tools today, they can feel like they're a little bit bolted on to an older, which they are, like an older workflow, or maybe a workflow that didn't know that AI was going to arrive so rapidly. And this is the fourth trend that's highlighted in the guide. So it's moving from tools to an orchestrated system. What's the key difference between an AI tool that assists a developer versus a truly orchestrated system where agents communicate with each other?
Yeah, well, speaking of bolted on AI tools, I feel like, the first major wave of this technology was like a chatbot, or it was either a chatbot or it was something built into your like predictive typing in your IDE. But, I think we picked chatbots primarily because of convenience, and it was just easy to bolt on to existing workflows. And I think years down the road, we'll look back at this period where we're interacting with our AI through chatbots as like a very relatively brief period in the AI adoption journey. But, and I think the important thing here to understand is that the future of AI in software development is not about isolated tools. You're not going to be buying a bunch of different AI platforms. It's going to be more about orchestrated systems where agents are reasoning, delegating, and operating across your entire software delivery lifecycle. So when you think about today's developer tech stacks, most of them lack native support for autonomy or inter-agent communications. So Google recently announced the A2A protocol, which just recently went under the Linux Foundation. This is like the first attempt to create like a standardized protocol within the space, but it's still very early on. There's no standard protocol that has emerged for agent communications, which is really forcing teams to rebuild integrations on their own for each use case. So, a lot of our existing infrastructure treats tools sort of like isolated functions rather than interconnected workflows. And the thing we're reiterating a lot here is that your agents are going to be operating across many tools, across many data sources. And until the native integrations are there, everything that you were going to be doing in that space as an engineering leader is going to be more custom and bespoke. There just simply aren't a lot of products out there that have solved this problem yet.
Yeah, I think that's the trend on where it's going. I also think that's why I see the demand for, hey, I need one platform that gives me kind of like that, I guess you can say control plane again, but that transparency of show me what all of my agents are doing. Is there actually bottlenecks or not bottlenecks? Who's talking to who? Do I have the control? because I think piecing it together is tough. Piecing it together is like it seems like it would be so hard to manage strategically over a long period of time. So maybe that's why the demand, I'm seeing a rise in that demand on my side from talking to customers.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think back to an episode we had with Amir Behbani from Memra, where one of the big points that he made was that, developers really sort of have to shift from like a carpenter mindset, like building discrete components, to more of an architect mindset. So designing systems, orchestrating higher order systems. And one of the ways you can tackle this or start tackling this problem today is to focus on challenges that are like low-hanging fruit within your workflows, things that consume large amounts of time, but also have really strong API integrations and standardized usage patterns. These are going to be the easiest to build like a custom integration layer with today that starts to connect like the most critical systems within your agentic development workflows. And as I mentioned a little earlier, like be prepared for this to be bespoke for the time being until a more standard and operational platforms start to emerge in this space. In the meantime, you can identify like a lot of these repeatable, high leverage tasks with clean APIs and consistent usage patterns. Like one really great example that we've covered here at Dev Interrupted is Google recently published research where they showed how they're now using AI to do 32-bit to 64-bit migrations. Like this isn't a glamorous job. It's something that, I'm sure there's some developers out there that love this kind of work, but I would say most developers don't like get out of bed excited to go migrate a bunch of
the ones that get paid a lot like it. Other than that, probably not.
But Google has implemented a workflow that uses human-in-the-loop mechanisms with a few autonomous systems like strung together to handle the bulk of that work now. And in this experiment that we covered, they did, I think it was close to 600 changes, and 75% of that was written by their AI system. And the developers involved with that estimate about a 50% productivity improvement. So, these are the kinds of things that you can start solving now, even though the platforms to solve this as a product aren't quite there yet.
Yeah, totally makes sense, Ben. Actually, I wanted to ask you, and it will lead to the next section in the guide here. But you said something previously that right now, or maybe when it started, it was kind of like, okay, humans are interacting with the AI agent, maybe asking questions of the agent or getting responses.
Mm-hmm.
And the section that we're going to talk about here is this trend that you're seeing with like, okay, recalibrating for developer to agent collaboration, right? Yeah. Developers are used to using tools, not used to collaborating with agents that like take an initiative. And the first question, two-part here. I'm sure that creates some friction, and the guide talks about that friction.
Yep.
But also, just wanted to get your opinion. How long do you think that will last, where it's like developer to agent versus agent to agent and a developer overseeing a bunch of agents together?
Yeah, well, I think at the core of this is going to be, today, if you think about how most people use AI tooling, they do their work, and then when they need AI's help, they go and they prompt AI. Mm-hmm. Imagine a world where that gets completely flipped on its head. Like AI is doing a lot of the legwork, and then when it gets stuck or when it's been told that this is a moment that you need to bring in an expert, or for whatever reason you might stop the workflow,
like it then the goes agent and saying, prompts, "I cannot proceed. I can't proceed. Like exactly. I need something." Yeah.
It goes and then prompts the human to intervene, so it's actually like almost a complete reversal from what we're doing today. And, as agents start to take that initiative within developer workflows, like it's going to create a lot of challenges around designing natural and low friction collaboration between humans and AI. And eventually, as you mentioned, it will be more agent to agent, but I think, I don't want to discount the role of the software engineer here. I think the humans in the loop are still going to be valuable for, quite some time, if not just for forever, effectively.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned, developers really aren't used to collaborating with agents like as a coworker. I don't want to call them a
Yeah.
coworker, but that's kind of how they might start to behave, especially when you start thinking about them taking initiative and going out, and maybe they see a customer report for a bug and they go out and fix it and then prompt a human to go see if that actually, fixed it before merging it, like that kind of workflow. And
Yeah.
the risk is that if these agents are misaligned with your goals, with the way that you build software, with anything within your team, anytime they're misaligned, you're going to create friction and inefficiency. And if you're asking your developers to override agent decisions, you're increasing cognitive burden. So if you have, getting back to this automation and guardrails, like if you have all of this autonomous automation without guardrails, it's a recipe for overload, especially as you think about a world where you have more and more bot-generated pull requests.
Yeah. Yeah, that honestly for me it goes back to like also again the beginning of what we talked about, the accuracy or the quality of the agent. Because you said I think actually there can be situations where it increases cognitive load because I keep having to correct the work that the agent done. Then you might say to yourself, why don't I just do it myself? Right.
Yep.
So it's like it starts with I think that foundational thing of like having the good accuracy of the agent by having great context and having an infrastructure that supports that great context.
Exactly. And I'm reminded of a great episode we had a while back with Tara Hernandez from MongoDB. And, she talked about how important it is to make the golden path the easy path. So on the probabilistic side, you can like work to change organizational norms to like accept agents as valid contributors. But then there's also like a deterministic side where you can start automating your guardrails to reduce that mental load. So, I've already mentioned the risk of shifting AI compliance left onto developers. Like if you're doing that without actionable automated oversight, that's where you're going to create a lot of those friction points in the collaboration workflows. So the more that you establish clear interaction patterns between their developers and agents, and design AI experiences that naturally fit into existing workflows, that's how you're going to build a lot stronger trust with your developers as you roll out your AI initiative and achieve better productivity improvements. Yeah, so actually, Dan, this brings us to the last and like one of the most crucial trends, I think, and that is that feedback loops can make or break AI adoption. And this time I wanted to flip the script. You've been asking me a lot of questions. I actually want to flip this one around and ask you about this because I think it's something that you probably have a lot to share. So why are feedback loops so critical? And how do teams create like a signal-rich environment that agents will need to get better over time?
Yeah. Okay. I want to talk about what I'm seeing from real life deployments, strategic AI deployments across like really cool and important companies. We'll start why feedback loops are important. I think everyone that's in engineering already knows this. It's so that you can get the information, tight little feedback loop so you can iterate quickly on your plan, strategy, and execute.
Yeah.
Now, with an AI strategy, what is needed to have a great feedback loop? We talked about it earlier in the episode. You need a platform that provides transparency, in this case, measurable transparency, into what are my AI agents actually doing? What are they producing? So I call that kind of like the first step. It's like, how much are they doing? What are they doing? Where are they doing it? Then as part of that, you need to understand, put the AI agents aside. Do I still have bottlenecks in my workflow? Let's say that I got a cursor or a copilot. Am I actually producing more work? Yes or no? So you have to have also that telemetry to say, and this is what I see most often, oh, I'm actually not producing more work because I have a bottleneck, for example, in my PR process. I have some agents generating some great code in the IDE, but my business didn't get any faster because I still have a bottleneck, for example.
Yeah.
That's having great transparency. And the third part, I think, to that, just starting with the transparency and actually receiving the feedback, is the feedback from the developer. Do I have a way to engage, see what the developers are experiencing, They can say, is this agent working well for me, not well for me, and so on and so forth. So the first part is end-to-end, I'll call it like single pane transparency. Now, the second part that I'm seeing to a strategy like this is actually taking action. So not just measuring, but taking action. And usually what I'm seeing customers do is they're asking themselves, am I purchasing the right AI tools? And am I purchasing the right AI tools in the right areas of my SDLC? So for example, I'll use the Cursor and Copilot to start with, because that's where most people started, like in the IDE code generation. But am I also purchasing agents that are maybe help testing, documentation, where LinearB specializes, AI code review, pushing code from PR to merge? And can I, again, measure each one of those? So the second part of this is actually getting two AI tools in place that will unblock the workflow end to end. And the third thing around it, we already touched on it in this episode, is do I have automated workflow and rules where control and governance is actually accelerating my workflow? So I do have automation. Do I have policies in place, support the tools that I've built? I have the transparency, and now I have the automated rules in place to actually accelerate their workflow. Those are the companies that I see that are doing the best job in their AI initiative for productivity.
Yeah, and I want to call out a past episode. Yeah, that's quite the journey that you're outlining there. And if you're an organization that's still like pretty early on to this, it can feel very daunting. Like let alone like adopting AI, but even just getting the more foundational practices of having visibility into where like engineering bottlenecks are. Like that alone is a challenge that like solving that today can be a huge benefit even without AI. And a lot of organizations out there, I think, are still trying to solve that. So we had Soumya Subramanian on on the podcast earlier this year. She shared an amazing story about how she's taken a lot of the knowledge she gained from Google about standardizing metrics, building a foundation of data-driven habits, and she shared a lot of great insights about how to effectively implement that within your engineering team. So, if you're deep into the AI, I think we've got a lot of great past episodes, but also if you're brand new to this stuff as well, there's still some great episodes for you to consume from our archive.
Awesome stuff. All right. I think that wraps us up for today.
Yeah.
So, Ben, thanks so much for walking through all of this with us. This guide is freaking awesome. If you or your team want to dive deeper into these 6 trends that we just discussed and get the full checklist for preparing your organization for your strategic AI transition, you can find the guide. The guide's called The 6 Trends Shaping the Future of AI Development. It's on the LinearB website, so linearb.io. We'll be sure to put a link into the show notes as well. And of course, Ben, thanks for joining, and thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you next week.